James Lacey here from Sweet Science of Fighting. Another breakdown for you. We have John Jones heavyweight training. It's a 2023 video, but it's obviously a lot of older footage going on here too. So again, I'm going to break what he's doing down, maybe what he's trying to achieve, the adaptations that are potentially happening in these scenarios. My personal preferences, again, nothing against the athletes, the coaches, anything like that. I'd obviously watching these, I don't have the full picture, so I was making a lot of inferences too. But we're starting with the leg extension. So I skimmed through this just to make sure it was all training footage, but it seems that a lot of this is footage taken from when he went through a big powerlifting phase. So if you remember, maybe it was a few years back now when he went through basically pure powerlifting training away from UFC and then kind of came back, put on a lot of size and was deadlifting close to 600 pounds, etc., etc. We'll touch on that in a bit. So that's probably where a lot of that is coming from. So when I'm talking about this, I'll kind of direct it towards like that is the kind of training that he's doing because it seems like that way. So obviously leg extensions, more of a bodybuilding style movement, trying to grow the quads. Now, typically if you are doing leg extensions, you're targeting the rectus femoris, the muscle that goes up the middle of your quad, versus squatting, you're targeting the vasti muscles in the quad, typically. Regarding actual, I guess you could say, quote unquote, functional performance or transfer to MMA and stuff, yeah, it's an isolated muscle movement. Would I advise someone doing it? It kind of just depends, right? So, if you're trying to build the strength in your quads, it can be an easy accessory movement to do. I don't think you need to do it. I don't think it's necessary. None of my programs have leg extensions in them in the Sweet Science of Fighting Underground. There are other ways you can kind of build mass or strength, and you can kind of leave that one out and save you a bit of time. But again, it's personal preference. Someone likes it, they can do it. I just don't think it has that much value, at least within we'll talk MMA, and because we're talking John Jones, we'll stay in that context. So then we're on a treadmill. Looks like some kind of almost tempo-ish running. Nothing too quick, nothing too slow. Yeah, it looks like a little bit of tempo work. Okay, hang on. He's off there. And then what have we got going on? Couple of spinning back kicks. And then push-ups. Probably doing 10 of those, I assume. Yep. And then... Okay, so that's actually quite a good way of doing intermittent aerobic work of generally high quality. So something that has become a little more popular within, I guess you could say, professional sports performance is this idea of tempo intervals, taken specifically from Charlie Francis in the old sprint days in the 80s. And it's the idea that you're doing like 70-75% effort runs, and you're doing those typically from anywhere from like 15 to 20 seconds, and you're doing this on the minute, and then you're resting on the minute and you're repeating, and then you can essentially progress that through increasing the intensity, reducing the rest times, or you can add more density. And this is one method to add more density. Because he's doing the running, he's coming off, he's doing a couple of spinning kicks on the pads and then doing push-ups. And the goal is when you're doing a lot of these different activities and not just running, you're getting more of a full body, I guess, aerobic effect and adaptations that are full body versus just the running. So something that I used to do as well with some athletes is we would do tempo running. This is for running-based sports, but tempo running, and then you would do 10 push-ups and then 10 like crunches. And then that would just make that time block within that minute more dense because you're doing more work, but it's still not hard enough where it's kind of fucking up what you're trying to do each time. So that's just something you can do. Typically, you're looking at anywhere from like 2 to 4 sets of, you can go like 3 to even 10 rounds. Usually works quite well. And then you can kind of start with just the running. You can start with longer rest times. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it, but it's just something that you can think about. And then we got, well, wait, is that a training mask or is that just a COVID mask? I'm not too sure. It's almost like your short side plank with rows. Actually, it's not a bad exercise. I quite like that one. So it looks like you're training a lot of the hips, that hip abduction, and then having the hip extension coming through. So it'll be hardcore on that bottom glute there. And then you're getting a lot of that stretch through this that top area there, which is quite nice. Then you're getting that row. Not a bad exercise. What else we got going on? We don't see that. Farmer's walks. Again, I'm assuming this is part of his powerlifting time. I do like carries. I'm a big fan of strongman style carries for MMA athletes and grapplers. I think they just do well for those kinds of sports where you have to manipulate another human being. Tricep extensions, again, another isolation exercise. If you want massive triceps, hell yeah, do these. I'm assuming this is part of his powerlifting days, working on his bench press. You would do something like this for your triceps. I still think doing some of this stuff is just good for just general elbow health. It doesn't have to be this heavy and going crazy, but doing some tricep isolated elbow extensions and elbow flexions or bicep curls, tricep push downs, etc. are just generally good to do. You don't have to do them all the time and do crazy lengths. Some stretching, we'll leave it. Okay, then we got some backwards running. I don't know. It's almost like backwards sprinting, actually. Even this. Don't know why. I can't tell you why they'll be looking to do something like that. Maybe some variation in training. Some hard sprints. Man, that is an athlete there. Look at the size of him. And he's able to sprint that damn quickly, eh? Like, oh, I missed it, did I? Look at this. You don't want to see a big dude like that running at you. Either way, I typically don't advise to do sprints, but it's personal preference whether you do it or not. If you feel comfortable doing them, definitely do them. I just advise typically not to, because hamstring injuries are very common within sprinting-based team sports. And if you're not a runner, which typically you're not because you're a combat athlete, probably not the best idea to do. Various pull-ups, going side to side, cool. Nothing wrong with that. What else we got going on? We got squats with chains. Nice. So I touched on some accommodating resistance in a previous video. So we actually talked about this with the podcast with Dustin Orenchuk a couple of weeks ago as well, if you want to check that out. But essentially, there's not too much difference. If you're just trying to improve or get stronger in these basic lifts, accommodating resistance has no real value. Where the value lies, I think, is more towards sports performance, like obviously like MMA here. And with the chains, you are essentially lightening the load on the way down, and then on the way up, it becomes heavier. Now, for pure muscle growth, that is not ideal. But again, MMA athletes aren't looking for pure strength or pure muscle growth. The benefit of the chains is because the weight increases on the way up, it means that you're maintaining or increasing velocity through the concentric. Now, typically without any bands or chains on there, you'll spend half the rep decelerating. Whereas when you add something like chains on, you can spend pretty much all the rep accelerating, and it becomes more of a, I guess you could say, a ballistic movement profile, which would mean it's more like a jump. So instead of seeing a deceleration and speed like coming down, you're going to see an acceleration all the way through. So they can definitely be handy to do. What else we got going on? Medicine ball slams back and forth to each other. I'm assuming that's maybe just part of the actual class or something like that. I quite like actually medicine ball slams as part of, for example, if you have an easier gym day, you can use things like medicine ball slams almost as like a power primer at the end of your warm up before you go do your easier stuff. And it almost gives you like a micro dosing effect of doing some kind of power work that isn't intense. So instead of going and doing a bunch of jumps and plyometric jerks, you can do something like this and it's relatively easy. So that's just something to bear in mind. Curls, of course, always got to do curls. And then looks like some high rep dumbbell rows. So typically this will be targeting more of the mid-upper back area with these. If that's what you want, perfect. I typically like to row the dumbbell towards the hip. Gets more of that, I guess, more of that lat area versus always being in the upper back, especially with fighters who are spending a lot of time in those positions where the upper back is kind of overactive. But that's just a personal preference. You may be trying to target the upper back here. And this would be these high reps. You could almost call these with the momentum like croc rows. So Matt Kroc made these famous. Essentially, it's going stupid heavy, with a little bit of body momentum, and it just creams your grip, but also absolutely smashes your back. That's a really good exercise. So it's in a few of the Sweet Tons of Fighting Underground programs, especially for grapplers. You can do them with straps as well. Obviously, then the grip isn't involved in much, but you can go heavier and you can overload the back more. Super legit exercise. Typically, you're looking for a weight that you can do maybe for like 10 reps strict, and then you're doing it with body English for most of the rest of it. Some grip work, very nice. Obviously, if you don't have these implements, you can use towels. Towel pull-ups are super legit. Definitely do those for your grip. What else we got? I like this, like a bent over. I can't even remember what we call that one, but I really like that one with the yeah, another one standing now, and with the Kaiser too. That's awesome. Is that that might be standing fitting there? Nice. He's got a Kaiser machine in his garage, so that Kaiser machine will track like speed and power, and because it's pneumatic and not cable, it's a lot smoother. I guess you could call it smoother as you do these rotations. And that bent over one on the knees is really nice too. Almost more of a, I guess you could say, quote unquote, specific exercise to MMA towards the ground and pound. Just some basic squats here. Those are all good. I'm sure there's starting strength coaches trying to poo-poo the depth, but starting strength sucks. So come at me with that. What else we got? Damn, John Jones being creepy. I really like these. I guess you could say what ab core exercise, whatever, the medicine ball. So having to catch the ball slightly or head height above your head puts a huge stretch on, or eccentric force on the abs, and then you're having to resist that on the way down and come back up. So you can do this side to side as well, like rotational throws and overhead like that. Solid exercise to do. Okay, that's still, geez, that got forever. And this is just wrestling stuff. Okay, now we're back into the lifting. So lateral raises. Yes, for general shoulder health, definitely. I still think that they're worth doing. Obviously, don't go crazy on them. A couple of sets here and there is more than enough because you're not trying to bodybuild. Same thing with the triceps. We've talked about this one already. He's just trying to get jacked. Don't blame him. There we go, bench. So this has a few names. In the southern hemisphere, it's called a bench pull. In the northern hemisphere, it's called a seal row. So what I like about this one is obviously it completely deloads the lower back and legs and hips because you're lying flat on this and you're able to pull to the bench. Now, one of the issues with the bench pull, well, I don't want to say it's an issue, but your range of motion is limited because the barbell hits. Oh, okay. He's actually using the right bar, but he's just doing it different. So the barbell typically hits the bench, and your range of motion kind of gets stuck with your elbow still in front of the body. Using this cambered bar that he has here, typically you want obviously the camber to be down so you can get more range of motion at the top. But hey, what do I know? And looks like we got more grip stuff, dead hangs. Definitely worth, such an easy way to do grip. You don't need any equipment except a pull-up bar or somewhere to hang, and you just hang for time. And you can accumulate time too. You can accumulate, a minute. So you could, instead of doing like one set, maybe you can only do 20 seconds. Maybe you try accumulate 40 seconds or 50 seconds or 60 seconds for that session or that day. And then you do that next workout. Maybe you're trying to accumulate 70 seconds or 80 seconds. It just gives you something to easily progressively overload there. Geez, he's still hanging. Beast. Okay, what else we got? Okay, then we got his powerlifting. So, heavy deadlifts. Is that 6 plates? Oh, he's got reverse band too. Okay, so really west side inspired. So West Side Barbell, I guess a legendary powerlifting club with Louis Simmons, they would use reverse bands. Now, the reason you'd use reverse bands, a couple of reasons. One, it's easier off the floor, harder at the lockout. So potentially if you're trying to overload your lockout because maybe that's where you're weak, you might do something like this. But typically it's used by geared powerlifters. By geared, we're not talking steroids, we're talking the suits. Just because of the way the strength curve is in a suit is different to raw powerlifting or raw lifting when you don't have a suit. The suit helps you off the floor, then you have to lock it out, similar to how the reverse band works. Now, if you're not a gear powerlifter, I don't think this serves any purpose to you whatsoever as an MMA fighter or any combat athlete. So I wouldn't do them. That's pretty simple. Then we got some pull-ups. What else we got going on? Oh, shirtless curls this time. Love inverted rows. You guys need to be doing these for sure. Especially as a bodyweight finisher, if you're trying to add size, you can do push-ups and inverted rows, set a rep goal. So for example, 50 inverted rows and 50 push-ups, and you just go back and forth with a little bit of rest until you hit that rep goal total. Doesn't beat you up, it's bodyweight. Perfect. Solid exercises to do. Looks like he's doing some grip stuff, some renegade rows. Not a fan of that exercise. I just don't think it makes any sense to do because you're so limited in what you can row. It doesn't really make any sense to me. Sure, you can say stability, anterior core, whatever, then just do other shit to target that. And that's just my opinion. Chin-ups. What else have we got going on? More sprints. Damn, he's a beast. Yeah, it is stand efforting. Okay. More powerlifting. Safety bar squat. I do quite like the safety bar, especially if you've got beat up shoulders. You need to get one of these. Perfect for MMA athletes that typically have funny upper body injuries, especially grapplers. Okay, that's pretty much everything. So I'll touch on the powerlifting thing too. It's 16 minutes, but just to finish up on the powerlifting. Now, if you read some of the comments from his coach about the fight after he went through all this kind of powerlifting stuff, he was saying that, you know, he thought he looked slow and all the heavy lifting was detrimental to him. And I think that kind of fit into the, I guess you could say, the traditional myth around, hey, heavy lifting makes you slow. Look, John Jones became slow. He did all this heavy lifting. He put on weight, etc. But got really muscular. He gassed out, that kind of stuff. Now, there is some truth. There is some truth to it, but as always, everything's nuanced. So yes, if all you're doing is hardcore powerlifting training and pushing your numbers as far as possible, it's going to fuck up your MMA training, and you are going to get slower. I guarantee you are going to get slower. And you probably are going to gas because you've added a lot of muscle mass, a lot of weight. And if you're not doing as much of the conditioning that you need to do and the speed training that you need to do to maintain or improve that as you add body weight and as you get stronger, it's going to negatively affect you. And that's just a fact. Now, where I guess you could say it's wrong that heavy lifting makes you slow is, well, heavy lifting doesn't make you slow unless that's all you're doing. If your program is well-rounded, where you're doing your high velocity or speed style training, so your jumps, your plyometrics, your throws, even Olympic lifts to some extent, kettlebell swings, all that stuff that's high velocity, and you're doing your heavy strength training, you're only going to get bigger, faster, stronger, etc. The problem is when you're going on a full powerlifting style routine, like maybe John Jones did here, I'm assuming, because that's kind of his main focus, and he has powerlifting coaches with him, so I'm assuming that's what they did, where you're only doing heavy squats, leg extensions, heavy deadlifts, etc., to build strength and muscle mass. And that's where you run into problems. When we look at the adaptations that occur from heavy strength training and then high velocity or speed training, a lot of them oppose each other. So you've got, one of them is around muscle fiber type. So it doesn't matter what you do. When you're weight training, you're always going to develop more type 2A fibers, which are kind of like your intermediate, I can't even say that word, intermediate fast twitch muscle fibers, and your type 2X or type 2B decreases massively. And this is probably an adaptation that is beneficial for sports like MMA because you have to have that aerobic component. You can't just have more type 2X muscle fibers like maybe a pure sprinter does, but having some might help. The other thing is the idea around co-activation around the joints. So in a squat here, for example, around the hips, you're going to have activation of the muscles on both sides of the hips or around the hips because you want that stability and safety as you're squatting. However, when you're doing ballistic actions, you can't have co-activation of the muscles because that slows you down. A really good example, like people that come in from strength training backgrounds to maybe come do boxing or something, and they're very stiff initially and they can't relax. And it's because they're so used to training in a way where all the muscles around a joint are activated to perform the movement. That's why you see that stiffness when people are throwing punches, or even in jiu-jitsu, a lot of stiffness there. And it takes time to learn to be able to quote unquote relax, to be able to throw with speed. And when you're doing things like jumps, throws, etc., that is inherent in the movement. There has to be activation of the agonist or the prime moving muscle, but the antagonist or the opposite muscle has to relax to allow that speed to happen. And that is an adaptation that happens through power training or speed training, but does not happen during maximal strength training like this. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't do it because the adaptation is posed. It just means that you have to do the other stuff too. You can't just do something like this. And that's just something to be aware of. There's some other conflicting adaptations within there, but that just covers some of the main ones and some of the main important ones within there. So my advice to you is do not do a pure powerlifting routine. Do not do a pure bodybuilding routine. You need to have a mixture of all of it. Again, Sweet Times Fighting Underground has those programs. If you're still listening to this, yeah, jump in. I mean, we've got some guys actually fighting soon that are in there that are running through the programs and in the community. You have access to me in there, so I've got guys messaging me, final week of the week of the fight, what should they do, etc., etc. So I help anyone out in there as well, since you're in the community. But stay tuned for the next video.